How many people are on IRC? Is it IRC channel? Oh my god, are you guys total noobs? IRC is the future.
Yeah, right.
Do we have a channel?
No, to be honest, I'm super frustrated at how things move to something that was super open to something that like barely works if you have the right software,
Yeah.
the right version.
I really like how fast Slack is. It's just awesome.
Yeah, right.
Well, what's it asking me to do?
Sorry. No! Stop showing the chats. I'm gonna censor myself doing the chats.
Now you're restricted to the one official client for the service you subscribe to.
That's right.
Which sucks. And only works on the right platform with the right version of the
You want to talk about it? I can record it.
No,
Okay, so guys, we're ready to rumble?
Yeah.
You want to start off first? First one? At least reintroduce everyone. DevOps.
Right. So guys, I'm
Anything go wrong? It's him.
I'm
the guy who said me to 6:30 and only showed up at 7:40.
right. I'm the guy who stepped up recently for the DevOps group because the previous guy stepped down and then nobody stepped up. We were like 24 hours left until it was disbanded, and I saw like there was like 400 something people in there, and then I also attended the previous meetup, so I thought it would be a shame if it was disbanded, so I stepped up. And then the rest is mostly thanks to Taisari, Chiliong, they did most of the work.
It's fine.
Really.
You're welcome.
I'm just
The guy who gets blamed for setting the wrong time.
and the 6:30 for food, not my arrival time.
No, don't take
just
that
to
too
be clear.
seriously.
Right. So in the future it will be 6:30 also, but it's not my arrival time. And really thanks to Henry for approaching me and offering to talk. We are doing this. We are trying to build the culture here. So we want to talk about later how we can do this DevOps meetup going forward. The suggestion is so far is do it monthly. We have like Golang every Tuesday, every last Tuesday of the month. We have Ruby. I forgot the date. First Tuesday of the month. Yeah. So the plan is to do something similar but not clash with them because eventually you see the same faces everywhere. So, we want to get more new faces, get the culture really growing. And again, thanks to Henry and Ang for volunteering to talk for this meetup.
Who's Ang, by the way?
You regret when I
Oh,
start
this guy.
speaking.
Okay, hi.
Oh, this guy. It's Han, damn it. It's not. No, sorry. Not Ang. It's Han. Just Han.
Okay, hi. Sorry.
Solo Han. That's the Han.
Yeah.
Sorry, bad pun.
Is this microphone facing the right way?
Yeah.
Omnidirectional.
It's omnidirectional. So the first talk, Henry will talk about. It's a weird title. It's like has $sign star star T. I don't know
Yeah.
why. So
Making your shit works.
let's get started.
Let's get let's get controversial.
I just shared a link to Facebook.
Since there's not that many people here, I just out of curiosity, do you guys all work in the DevOps sort of role? Right. What do you guys do for a living? Students or nothing?
Yeah.
And
Some students, some developers.
you're working where?
Yeah, I'm working with Genexu, if you know Ringgit Class.
Reddit.
Ringgit Class.
Oh yeah, I heard of them. Yeah. Yeah. Reddit's here. Oh, you want to sit down? There's some. You sure? Just
Come, we
don't
have like
don't beat the shit out of me,
more
please.
space here.
Okay, so how much time do I have?
All the time.
I don't like to do. I try to make the stuff interesting because I don't know about you guys, but I've attended a lot of talks and I usually find them quite boring. So sorry if I let what I have to say with stupid jokes or something like that. And you're welcome to just ask me some stupid questions. Okay. So making your shit work. So I just wanted to yeah, I'm here in Malaysia. You probably won't see me again. I'm one of those creepy white guys that married a local, and I had a child here because my wife couldn't have the child in Singapore because the law prohibits her from passing Malaysian citizenship onto a child. So that's why we're here in Malaysia.
Is it a joke also or no serious?
What? No, so it's not a joke, but the creepy part is a joke, obviously. So yeah, the baby's come out, so I'll be in Singapore next month, hopefully. Because this place, the internet here sucks. I need to move on, guys. I've got 10G at home.
You're just staying in the wrong place.
What do you call it?
Not as
Malaysia.
fast as Pagi.
So who am I? I've been running like Linux since 2000. I mean, I don't know what DevOps is to you. This is not going to be about running a domain controller or anything like that. I'm a hardcore Linux sort of loser, as I call myself. Linux user, not LOSER, loser. I went to University of Helsinki to try meet Linus, but he had long gone. That's kind of sad. But I've been running Linux for a while. I'm also involved in the AWS stuff. I don't work for AWS, despite this ridiculous bag. I also created my own Linux distribution called Web Converger, which you probably never used. And I'm a Golang and serverless fanboy, and I'm also into MikroTik. Any MikroTik users here? Do you know what MikroTik is? Who knows what MikroTik is? Okay, one or two. Okay, that's cool. So this is going to be kind of like from a Linuxy standpoint. And I'm here, to be honest, I thought this meetup was tomorrow, so if this comes across as a bit unpolished or unorganized, it's because it is. I just made these slides like an hour ago, and I'm here just to share what I know so I can learn from you guys, hopefully. I'm just going to share maybe some best practices that I've picked up along the way and some tools I like. And I wanted to mention that I have a YouTube channel. It's not entirely about DevOps. Sometimes I talk about, I don't know, networking, and I talk about business, and I talk about how much I hate things. I don't know. Sometimes I rant, but it's about Linux. So I encourage you to join my fan base. And I use Arch Linux.
Subscribe, and what's the
like, subscribe, and don't kill me, please. So I work on this startup called Unity. Oh yeah. Subscribe. Yeah. I work on this startup. Who works in a startup, by the way? Ring Plus is a startup? I guess so.
Not anymore.
Okay. So anyone else? You all work for some big evil company? Yes? Oh.
Oh yes.
Oh yes. Well, yes. I work for a company called Unity. It's a startup, but not to sound whiny about it, but the startup, they decided to use Bugzilla. Who's familiar with Bugzilla? As the backend. It's a bit of a zillion lines of Perl code type monstrosity.
Why?
But
It's the best interface I've ever seen.
So, oh shit. So basically,
it's the COBOL of bug reporting and issue tracking.
Anyway, like it's got problems, but I mean, like most of you, you know, as in a DevOps role, you didn't get to choose the stack. Some other person did. So now I'm having to support it.
I'm so sorry.
But the idea is to bootstrap the system using Bugzilla, because to be honest, what Unity is a bug tracker for property. So the idea is that you maintain property, and there's incidents like a broken toilet or the light doesn't work. You capture those issues, and to be honest, Bugzilla has been in use by my employer for a number of years. He likes the system. He's familiar with the system. So the idea with Unity is that we have this fancy front end in front of it. Anyway, I maintain the whole AWS stack, Bugzilla plus a front end, and it's quite complex. There's also various microservices to make it all work. So, I mean, who uses Docker and all that sort of jazz? It's a fucking nightmare. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that too much. What I want to talk about is monitoring the system to make sure that a complex piece of software like Unity and maybe the stuff that you maintain is kind of working. So hence my title, making sure your shit works. So so I'm just going to ramble on here. You can probably read my text because that's what I'm going to do about what I think is important. Oh, don't trip over the cable. So the number one issue I find with some sites that I use, I don't. Should we check out Ring It Plus? If I go to your website and I want to contact you, is it easy to do? Contact us. Okay, that's not too bad. But there's lots of websites out there that fail in this stupidly easy thing to do. Basically, what I'm trying to say is make it easy for someone to tell you that there's something wrong with your site. Don't use a form, because a lot of forms are broken because they've got some crazy captcha or something crazy. So Ring It Plus, well done. You did it right. The next thing I wanted to say, when it comes to monitoring, there's a ton of different ways to monitor your website. I guess the most basic way to monitor your website is just with like pings. Does anyone just monitor their website with ping? You know, ping them or something like that? Okay, there's a billion ways to do it. But I just wanted to mention that ultimately you gotta if you're gonna approach the problem correctly, you gotta think what your customer considers as a working site. You know, a customer doesn't really care about your ping time if he can't log in or register or do this and do that. So those are the key flows you got to think about monitoring. And another best practice I would advise to look out for is when you write integration tests. Like we have the problem in Unity, to be honest, is that yes, it's easy to create a user. Yes, it's easy to maybe change your user's profile data and read from it. But is it easy to delete your user? Holy shit, there's no facility to delete your user. So now if you're creating users to try and test that you can create user, there's no way to delete the user? Okay, that's dumb. Because now you have like millions of stupid zombie accounts on your system or something like that. So you should design to be able to like test and monitor things. A health check is another thing which I see that's often done incorrectly. A health check shouldn't be just pinging your website to make sure it's responding with a static resource. It should be maybe testing the underlying data connectivity, like testing that your database works. You know, I'll demonstrate a bit later. How much is my coffee? Another best practice I would like to share with you is that, you know, alerts. When you're alerting that something is going wrong with the system, ideally an alert has a description, because it's not just here, or I've seen it everywhere. How many times have you got an alert like something is down? Now what? What are you supposed to do now? Or you know, there's some 500 errors. You should have a process or a description to show to help someone, if not you, to follow up on them. I also wanted to mention, who uses AWS here? Okay, most of you guys. Well, you know, CloudWatch is pretty nice. Who knows what a canary metric is? A canary metric, just for an example here, I think Amazon.com's the thing where you buy stuff from. The canary metric, I think, was orders placed per second or something like this. So this is a canary metric for them, because if that orders per second goes down, then they know something is wrong. And if that order, I mean, that's the fundamental metric for their whole system. So it's great when you have that canary metric. I don't know what is it for Ring It Plus? Amount of people who finish a form or something, right? Who submit a form. Or for a lot of startups, it's probably user acquisition. It's like, how many registrations can you get? that's your canary metric, and you're watching it like a hawk, making sure that it doesn't go down. But to be honest, in my experience, canary metrics are cool, but there's so many other things you need to account for too. So you can get blindsided if you just look at one canary metric. But it's nice to have something to look out for. I use a whole bunch of tools. I am an Arch Linux user. I'm an open source fanboy, but I'm not afraid to admit when a third party who perhaps isn't transparent at all does it better than I do. Like for example, who uses Postman? Okay, half of you. Okay, well, Postman is a fantastic tool for documenting APIs, but another fantastic feature about it is monitoring your APIs. It's super awesome. Another tool I use is Apex Ping. Who uses Apex Ping? It's just like Pingdom. I use it to monitor some sites, but the cool thing about Apex is that it looks nice. It monitors the site from different things all over the world, I guess like Pingdom does. But I like the fact that it uses a standard metric called AppDex. Look it up on Wikipedia. But I mean, what do you guys use to ping your sites with, out of interest? All right. Well, I like AppDex because if it's above 0.7, you're doing a good job with your CDN. If it's like below 0.5, many of you guys probably, do you guys cater for a global audience or just a Malaysian audience? Global. Well, if you're global, you want to make sure your AppDex is like 0.7 and up. So this is a cool tool to make sure your CDN's kind of working. Your low latency from around the world. There's UIlicious. Who's heard of UIlicious or uses UIlicious? It's a tool to basically do things like that. What is it called? Chrome Driver or Puppeteer? Yeah. It does that sort of stuff for you, which is a time saver, because when you write your own Puppet scripts, it takes freaking forever. And when your UI guys change your design and break your Puppet scripts and makes you want to cry, you don't have to worry about that, because these guys have to worry about it because you pay them to do it. And I think we pay them, I'm not sure we're allowed to disclose how much we pay them, but we pay them a lot less than an engineer costs. A lot less. And they do way more than even I can do. So, anyone using Prometheus? One dude. Prometheus is a bit heavyweight, and to be honest, I hate it, but it's a cool sort of meta thing to sort of monitor your monitors, if you know what I mean. I use it. Don't hold me to it. I don't know of anything better, but Prometheus is open source and it's very flexible, so you can monitor just about everything. Like I monitor my home electricity with it.
Is this actually much more? It feels much more from a sysadmin perspective. Is that it's an SNMP, but for web and also the new applications, that way you can actually design what sort of metrics that you want to be able to collect and script. So it is, to me, it feels exactly like SNMP for someone.
Well, SNMP I think Prometheus is pull based and SNMP is push, or it's broadcast. Is it? Who knows?
Yeah.
Grafana is a tool that I love to hate, but to be honest, over the last 6 months or year, I think Grafana is actually quite good.
They went a long way the last.
Yeah. So I use Grafana like I don't like to stare at the Grafana metrics, but it's usually in one of my tabs. Serverless framework, I use that because who's into Lambda and shit like that? Yeah. Well, the cool thing about serverless is that it does run my Golang program, but it forces me to like. It gets my structured logging going up into CloudWatch. I can query about 5xx errors or whatever. And also it does alerts. Like you can say that if that particular endpoint hits a 500, email me, whatever. Another tool I like is called Help Scout. Is anyone using something like Help Scout? It's basically allows you as a team to have one inbox. To be honest, you can set that up in Fastmail if you know what you're doing. It's not that hard, but most people don't know what they're doing, so I recommend you use Help Scout. So, Grafana, this is the tool I probably use. Jesus, I use this tool a lot. But I noticed that a lot of people use it incorrectly. The common mistake I found with people that use Grafana in a DevOps point of view is that they look at the averages. You see here, you can put the stats. I think by default it's average. I don't think there's even an option to choose P99. But I must say, as a DevOps person, you got to be looking at P99. P99, if you don't know, is the worst experiences of 1% of your user. You can think of that. And if the 1%, and those are the sort of metrics you got to bear down on, because if 1% are having crazy, I think on my dev environment here, someone had a 20-second round time trip for some request. That's a disaster. As a rule of thumb, I try to keep all my requests lower than 200 milliseconds around the world. If it's local, obviously, it should be very, very, very much faster than that. So P99 is a great way to find those bad user experiences and do something about it, perhaps. And obviously, the cool thing about Grafana is that I'm like using it with, what do you call it, load balancer, what is it called, target response time. There's lots of little statistics you can use to plot with Grafana, but that's one of the cool, that's the ones I like to use a lot. Response time. This is what Postman looks like, the monitoring thing. If it's all green, that means all the APIs that you defined are healthy. And furthermore, with Postman, you can define tests, which like check for certain strings or something in the response. I really like Postman. I guess the only bad side about it is that you got to pay for it. And if you do a lot of requests, yeah, you have to pay more or something. This is the user interface for UIlicious. You're probably thinking here that you need to write these scripts yourself. To be honest, they write the scripts. You pay them a fraction of what you pay an engineer, and they write the scripts for you. Admittedly, the scripts that they write is in their own sort of weird JavaScript language, which maps to their Puppeteer instance, but it's just so nice that they can do this sort of flow testing for you, because who's done Puppeteer scripts himself? It's a goddamn nightmare. Getting someone else to do it is such a time saver, it is ridiculous. And they also support lots of UAs and all that sort of stuff, and also different resolutions and shit like that. This is what Prometheus looks like, pretty much like hell on earth. I use it, yeah, as I mentioned, for pinging and it's just a kind of a backup to Apex ping, basically. And I use it for little other boring stuff. So alerting, oh, there's so many ways to alert, aren't there? But to be honest, my favorite way of alerting is this thing called email. Who's with me on email? Email for life. I'm a huge fan of email. So you can alert from CloudWatch metrics. You can use SNS or something like that. You can use mobile notifications. To be honest, I've been to work environments where they go, oh, let's set up a rota so this person gets like alerted so they wake up at 3 a.m. in case something goes wrong. To be honest, if you work into an environment like that, you're doing it wrong. They're doing it wrong. They're idiots. No one should wake up in the middle of the fucking night for any reason. You've got to be doing it right from the first place. So maybe I'm a genius, but I've never had to have one of these sort of freaking midnight issues, right?
Is your users in the same time zone?
Pretty much, yes.
That's why you don't get users using it at 3 a.m. calling you.
We do use Slack. I mean, it's not my choice. If I had a choice, I would use this thing called IRC. But unfortunately, most people are idiots around the world, and they have to use something like Slack. To be honest, I wrote a Slack bot the other day, which I think might be of use to you. This thing monitors our AWS account. We have 3 AWS accounts, And the thought that I always have that keeps me hot under the collar, what happens if one of our access keys are compromised and someone logs in and starts mining Bitcoin? So the only way, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can track these sort of compromises to your AWS account. Ultimately, is not to use trusted advisor and have a cloud trail and have AI. The real way to check something has been effed is to look at the money, because if your estimate charges goes up, that means something is very wrong with your account. So I'm tracking the estimate charges. So if there's, what do you call it, derivative, if the, I mean, your estimate charges are always going up, but if there's you know, a marked increase on that, then I get alerted. So please feel free to fork and use this code. So yeah, there's different ways of alerting, but ultimately I prefer email because, you know, it's easy to filter and it's asynchronous. It doesn't, you know, like if there's someone working next to me and his phone's going off every 2 seconds, I say to him, fuck off, don't work next to me. I need it quiet. I need to do work. Having notifications is a huge problem today. And this is why email, beautiful, love it. So another cool thing I like to use a lot is CloudWatch. And you can think of CloudWatch as just a centralized logging service. But it does have cool features that you can basically log JSON strings, and then you can search for the JSON strings. So in this example, I'm searching for all requests that have a 500 error. That's pretty nice. What's not so nice about it is that that doesn't work across log groups. It only works in one log stream or whatever, in one log group.
Basically hosted Kibana. Never used
Well, Kibana is not the same actually. Kibana is way more powerful, but I don't like to run Elasticsearch clusters and all the rest of it. So my advice to you is the minute the minute you start having to require Elasticsearch, and to be honest, there's some use cases you just cannot escape Elasticsearch, like analyzing a shit ton of access logs. I don't think there's any other way than using Elasticsearch in Kibana, but I would try avoid it as much as possible. So yeah, CloudWatch, you can do nice little queries. This is a query with access logs. There's also nice CLI tools, so you don't actually have to sit in a slow browser tab. You can actually use CLI tools to tail CloudWatch logs. But as I mentioned here, there isn't a good way to search across log groups unless you use Elasticsearch or something crazy, or Athena or something like that. I'm not a big fan of rolling out some new stuff. Another sort of best practice I wanted to share with you is that I think every HTTP endpoint should maybe show the version, because I hate working with applications where you don't know what the flip it's running. So I show this to, I mean, I just give this example to people, like, hopefully you work with people who are sane and it's easy to tell the version of the software that you're running. Because in DevOps, I like to think of myself as like the release manager. I'm ultimately responsible of what's running. And if I don't know what the version is, you're an idiot. So this is a good practice. Another thing I like to do is make sure I have a route which basically fails. Because there's all these health checks and, you know, alerts and things like that, but often they're not tested. You know, you got to test for failure cases. So this is a route that I use to test something has gone wrong. And I mentioned this with health checks. A lot of times I look at a health check code, and the health check is just testing if the app responds, which is boring. You should be testing if you have connectivity to your underlying data source, whatever the hell that is. I mean, usually that's a database. So doing something like this in your health check. So this health check is mapped to this thing. Doing something like this is so important. Please do it right. Otherwise, your health check doesn't have much value. So yeah, show version. Make sure you can fail from your app, and do a ping for your health check. I'm a big Golang fan, and why? It's strongly typed. The Go testing framework is pretty. Who uses Golang here? Couple. Oh, dude, I know you, Michael. It's pretty good. You can actually do a lot of like monitoring with Go test, and I actually do that to some extent. And you can do things with your CI/CD. If you follow this link, you'll see quite a complicated Travis. Who uses Travis here? What are you guys using for CI? Circle? Jenkins? Jenkins, what year is it? 2008?
Yeah.
Things have moved on, guys. But there are issues, I guess, using a third party. But anyway, the one issue I ran into just the other day was that we're doing CI and it was failing. But the reason why it was failing is because the database was using security groups, and one of the tests was requiring a database. But anyway, these are all these fun things to look out for. I wanted to say that you should, if you work with other people, personally, it's just me, myself, and I, and we're a strong team. But my boss is an asshole, and that's me. If you work with other people, this is some things you can do, i.e. exercise that make sure your health checks are working. One thing I like to do, who knows about the legendary IP 1234? If you change one of your DNS records to 1234, you'll have exciting times, because basically when you ping it, it just basically times out. I mean, it doesn't time out. So you have very interesting failure cases when you test with 1234. I recommend you do that. Yeah, obviously you should exercise with your colleagues, I think. You know, to be honest, I haven't really done this with my colleagues. As I said, I work by myself, but you should make sure you're on the same page. And, oh yeah, of course, as I mentioned, you should always be able to roll back the software that you're controlling, right? What? Load balance. Oh, rollback. Well, that's a good question, I guess. This depends on the stack. If you use Docker, oh Jesus! Oh, if you use Docker, my God, you have to figure out the hash that no one knows, and then you have to. Oh no! Don't use Docker. I use a.
Because you're doing it wrong. If you use proper tags, it's easy. You can find new tags.
Yeah, but most people use latest.
Or if you use it wrong, then.
Well, I'm not saying.
Just saying.
The trouble is that you might use it right, but 99% people use it wrong.
But to be honest, isn't the job of DevOps
Well, to use Docker. Well, to be honest, I set up the whole Docker. What do you call it? CI/CD.
I don't particularly like how they did the tags, but if you do the tags properly, running back is straightforward.
Yeah, you're right.
Depends on your side effects. So if you have any of your stack, like for instance Django, you actually need to do your database alterations. You kind of quite hard to go back any schema changes.
That's the thing with when you have state change on the version. That's how there is no easy way of rolling back. So that's regardless of using Docker or any other alternative.
Right. I usually use Lambda. The reason why I like to use Lambda is that if you use a Docker-based CI/CD flow, you're probably lucky to be able to deploy your Docker instance in about 10 minutes. How long does it take you to roll out a new Docker image in your infra?
Depends on what you build.
Yeah.
If your build process is low, then it's low. But if your build process is fast, then it's fast.
Yeah.
Well, so when you roll out a new image in a cluster, in my experience, it takes like minutes upon minutes. But anyway, I usually run. I just want to demonstrate. Can you see all that? Can you see me?
Yeah. The problem with Docker is
Shit,
for a lot of the more standard ways of managing a server, it has consolidated over many decades. And so over the years, people kind of figure out, okay, this is the best practice, this is how you do it, this is how you roll back, this is how you monitor. And Docker is somewhat new and ever-changing target. So a lot of things is, if you see how people did it 2 years ago, it was crap. If you see how they did it like a year ago, it was crap. 6 months ago, it was okay. today is like okay, but it's an always changing target because it's somewhat fresh.
Okay. Well, Docker, in my opinion, Docker's the old way of doing it, and I hate maintaining our Docker shit. The new way of doing it is Lambda, and I use tools like this. As you can see, I can deploy in 20 seconds, and I can roll back in probably a second. So my iterations are extremely fast, my rollbacks are extremely fast, and I can do more things, and I'm more productive.
So, like I said, if you do
You
the
have a
tagging
slow network
properly,
right now. It's taking forever to.
Yeah,
What is it?
so
this is a bad example because I got a binary in there.
if you do the tagging properly, your rollback of Docker is the same.
Dude, you cannot be faster than this. There's no way you can be faster than that. And when you use Docker, I mean, I don't know how you do it in your company, but like I've got like 5 EC2s running. How long does it take an EC2 cluster like that to roll out an image? It takes fucking forever in my experience.
Are you using Docker Swap to traditional cluster?
I'm using, unfortunately, this piece of shit called ECS CLI.
That's your problem.
But to be honest, I've gone to Kubernetes meetups and I say, please show me, master, make it faster. But nothing's faster than this, in my experience. And
Docker does something really simple. It allows you to package your software in an image with all the dependencies.
well, AMIs do that. AMIs are much faster than a Docker image.
Hell no, they're not.
Why not? AMIs are block level. Docker images are like crazy AFS layers and shit like this. Anyway, let's not talk about too much about Docker, except that it's a fucking train wreck and I hate it.
Come on.
What I was trying to say is, it does one thing, and
It's pretty bad.
No, that one thing is good.
AMIs are so much better than dude.
What I find usually frustrating is that the tooling around it and all the things that people say, if you're using Docker, you should also use this tool and this other tool and this orchestration. But that is harder, and it brings you to something that was supposed to be simple and a solution to a whole new level of problems. Now you have to manage.
How would you roll out an image on a cluster? A fault tolerant, not dropping a request when you roll out a new image. You have to use something like AWS. You have to use something like Swarm. You have to use some bullshit like Kubernetes. So
Can we have a cook-off?
What?
Cook-off. See if we can do it faster.
okay. Well, I don't think you can beat me here. I'm doing a rollback in a
It's a
second.
race to see who can do it faster.
Oh,
Bake off, sorry. My English sucks. It's called bake off.
Okay, listen.
We need to have a bake off.
This is my last slide. This is my last slide, and then you guys can torture me. I mean, DevOps. I'm hopefully I'm not coming across like I have all the answers here. I think DevOps is actually super complicated. There's no right way to do it, but I think you need to be super organized and pretty detail oriented. And as you guys know, no one says thank you when everything's going well. In my experience, DevOps requires a lot of communication. Like, I have to tell developers how to do things, and I have to, and I'm often on the front line. When a customer is unhappy, I get to see it first usually. I think it's important that you write and understand and digest your health checks. And I guess my thing that I wanted to stress out tonight, that's why I pointed out all those third-party services, is that you should try and get the boring shit about pinging your site, the boring shit about testing your flows, the boring shit like Postman stuff, to get third parties to do it. Hopefully you don't work for a bank where paying $5 doesn't take 6 months, but a lot of these third-party services are really quite cheap. So use them. They're a lot cheaper than a developer. But the good news is that all the stuff gets easier with experience, and learning from you guys and hopefully what I had to say. And the final thing I wanted to say is that it's your job to reduce complexity. So this is why I hate it when I meet people who say, "Oh, we have to use Kubernetes now." No. There are ways to do it that are much, much simpler. No, we're not using Kubernetes. And you always got to strive to make things simpler, because ultimately, if you maintain a very complex and increasingly complex system, your job will be much harder as a result. If you the stack, I mean, unfortunately, the stack that I administer right now is a bazillion lines of Perl and zillion lines of Node.js and 1 trillion lines of dependencies, like I guess most of the people have to
Why
experience.
don't you rewrite in
In Golang, good
Rust.
idea.
Yes, Rust.
But to be honest, I am implementing some things in a sane way. But you do what you can. But yeah, I would stress try and avoid complex systems and try keep it simple. Because yeah, that will make your job easier in the long run. Okay, that's it. Now you can bombard me with your crazy Docker questions.
But Google is using Kubernetes, so it must be robust. And
Oh, must be good. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Oracle uses. Well, guys,
it solves a problem that most people don't have.
For the record, we use a lot of Kubernetes, and what we can say is that if you don't need to use Kubernetes or you don't use Kubernetes, don't use it.
It solves a problem that most people don't have. So the
It
thing
does,
is,
yes, that's correct.
if you do have that problem in specific, then it's good. But if you don't, you're using a software that's way more complex.
What exactly is the problem?
I don't know. I don't have it.
well,
So I don't have a data center full of machines that I have to allocate applications, and people just say, okay, I want X many instances of this, and it magically runs somewhere. I don't have that problem. I have a handful of instances that I probably know how many they are and what they do. So by adopting a solution that caters for something much more complex, and then I just make my life much more complicated than it needs to be. So.
Oh, camera. One of the reasons to using Kubernetes, like, I mean, not Kubernetes, Docker, sorry. For example, if you need WebSockets, like Lambda API Gateway can't do WebSockets. A good reason to use, I mean, it's not a good reason, it's like, unfortunately, you can't use serverless for this use case. The way serverless works, for example, is that your code is most likely not warm, because unless you're a very popular website. And what happens is that if you have a database-backed application and you have a process starting from cold, most processes take at least a second or two to establish a database connection. Now, if your first user experience is a 2-second round time, then you fucked up. It should be less than 200 milliseconds, not 2 seconds. So basically, serverless is not very good if you have a database in the mix. And yeah, other stuff where you need connection pools and things like that. But otherwise, you can use serverless. Like I think of DevOps as an evolutionary thing. Like, you know, the first time I started doing DevOps, I did manually everything. You know, treating your computer like your machine like a pet. Then I started using maybe Chef or Ansible to do my stuff, which was okay. I guess it solved the problem. Then Heroku came along and blah, 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 blah. Then we have Docker and CoreOS and I guess Kubernetes. Now we have, okay, I've skipped a set. Now we have ECS, which is a bit more managed. But then, yeah, the final stage, you know, what do you call that? Serverless, man. Serverless is basically, I guess it's just my takeaway that I'm trying to say to you guys. If someone can keep your server running, can scale your server, can patch your server, and do it all for you at a very good price, maybe you should start using their service. And that's what serverless is for the most part, even though it sounds like you're not using serverless, which doesn't make sense. But anyway, use serverless where you can. It makes, and yeah, the great thing as opposed to Docker is that you can deploy so much quicker, you can roll back so much quicker using serverless. Okay, I preached enough. I hope you learned something. If there's some tool I should be using to make my life easier, I don't know. Please let me know.
Yeah.
Who's using Lambda or something like that. Bars. Oh. It's one person. Is Ring It Plus the only people that do anything? What are you big evil companies doing? How do you or do deployments? Docker?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
The biggest thing that you have to use Docker and other things is that when you need to be deploying on premise, when you don't get all the fancy tools you're used to, unfortunately, there it goes.
Yeah, on premise.
Yeah.
It's like.
Yeah, you have to use our really old OS. Oops, that's why we use Docker. Oops, Docker has issues, and in the end, we reinvent on-premise clouds. So there it goes. Next.
Right, so let's take a 5 minutes break. Refresh yourself, and in the meantime, if anybody have a job ads, you can just come here and speak about it. If you guys are hiring or something.
Relax.
Are we live or are we off stream?
You're off screen.
Anyone online?
My hand is with you. That's why. No,
Before we continue, are we our official Facebook or what?
She does the job. What?
Facebook open. Are we still on Facebook? Yes, no,
Too
yes,
much
no.
detail.
Voice
Too much.
Question, guys. How many of you guys heard of this meetup on Facebook?
What's Facebook?
What is Facebook?
You have found your Facebook profile for many years ago.
So, and
Yeah. I don't think we're actually that active in Facebook groups. To be honest, it's like I wanted to ask, do you guys ever give a damn about most like care about discussion groups, Facebook groups, places to chat or share? Do you guys?
He's a fan of email.
Email.
Let me introduce you to this mailing list called MyOSS.
What? What again?
MyOSS. Too old. Emails are for the old guys.
Old guys.
I mean, that's the other thing. Is that a lot of I think everyone is using quite different platforms these days. It is still for better or for worse, but it's scattered. What do you think? If someone wants to follow up discussions on why Docker is the bring it offline, online, Facebook, whatever, where should they go? Slack, free note channel to my
Slack.
Email.
you can't post picture of cats.
Well, I like Reddit because it's at least it's not behind a paywall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but which submission?
I guess you can just Malaysia.
Malaysia is full of those horrible. Crap, I said that online, right? Anyone watching? Malaysian Reddit is full.
I think I need to move this. Can I move this?
Yeah.
Just. Which evil companies do you guys work for?
Oh wait. Why is it evil?
Most companies are evil. It's the Marxist philosophy. It's a global company.
Oh, okay.
What is this called?
Same with you. You are doing like
Mobile control.
mobile content provider monetization. Why are you looking at that?
Is it like is it like one of these BuzzFeed?
No, I guess the biggest one in our industry would be, in our field, I mean, is fortune. Look it up. Campaign stuff. This is the biggest one in this. You can pay through your operator, mobile operator.
Oh, it's like mobile billing.
Yeah, it's kind of
Isn't that stuff dead compared to? I mean, dying compared to Stripe on its base?
Dying.
Dudes,
you're dying.
I'm sorry.
You're dying.
Yeah, like
Thanks for the honor.
Stripe.
because
It's kind of credit card.
yeah, Stripe take card billing, but I think these interesting things, you know, like Apple does things, you know, like these. I think there's like a web payments technology in browsers. You know, browsers can have like a wallet, and then you can use your wallet in different sizes.
How do you charge them?
Usually with a credit card.
Right,
Usually,
so-
but the idea I think is that you can use other things.
The thing is that with mobile, the thing is that
Oh yeah, you have a
in
balance.
most of the countries,
Yeah.
mobile penetration is better, especially in certain areas like, for example, where I come from, people don't trust much. I come from Egypt, so we don't trust much credit cards. We feel like your money.
You're an Egyptian.
Yeah. Why are you bring me this? Not an extremist, not a terrorist. Don't worry.
When I
No,
think
let's say
of Egyptian, I think, you know, like
No, we don't have. Alright, let's fix that image for you. When you think of an Egyptian, think of Muhammad Salah. No.
oh yeah.
Yeah, yes. You should think of that.
5 minutes finish.
Yeah, I used to work for an OTP company called Small, and most of the revenue they got was variable. I thought it was a bit dishonest sometimes because you know, like people, it's usually poor people, right? And they only have a few dollars on their account, and they get debited $5.
Not necessarily. Right. So usually the poor people are the one using prepaid.
Oh,
No,
you get postpaid with the credit on too.
the postpaid, those are crazy because you can charge anything, but this is
Shit, I'm on prepaid. Okay.
because, for example, for me, I'm prepaid. It gives me control. It's better for me.
yeah, I'm on prepaid.
Yeah, but usually the operators have limitations and regulations and these kind of things that don't allow you, for example, to charge 100 ringgit. There are limits and there are price listings that you shouldn't charge units that are outside these things. It has lots of regulations because essentially to the operators, I'm getting money away from my customer base through code. So this is kind of a luxury service that they are providing. If you cause trouble, they will be losing their customers. If you charge someone and they complain, this is trouble. So this is the problem with our industry, our business. A complaint could hurt you because
Who's gonna find out about a complaint? Usually, my experience, a complaint to a mobile operator is like talking to a fucking wall.
you wouldn't believe me that the complaint you get, you wouldn't believe. Some of them are so extreme that they get one complaint and we find right away that right
The service will be stopped. We are not allowed to continue
let's
to
investigate that. What happened there?
I wouldn't want.
Even more, because you're giving me money already by your code.
Maybe is a weirdo Islamic thing? Why are people so weird about it? I don't understand it because there's no if someone makes a complaint, there's no incentive for the company to deal with it in a timely manner. Why are
Guys,
people being very relaxed?
you guys wanna come
It
and
doesn't make sense to me.
sit
Because if your
closer? No?
company
Okay. So we have our second session. Ang Ching Han will talk about he read the SRE book, kind of. So Google published the SRE book. Yeah, this book. The first one was free. The second one was free for a period. The ebook version at least. So he will talk about the book.
You keep it on your desk so that people think you have read it.
You got it. See, I'm very honest here. So first thing first, I'm Han from Tuksuri. So yep, welcome to our office. And the theme of being honest is that I didn't prepare anything. So even though I have more than 1 hour, I like.
Can we look at the book?
Sure. So okay. So I think one of the things I want to be able to talk about is that in terms of DevOps and SRE, Site Reliability Engineering, how is it going to be the same? And also is that these two books, which is actually two books, are pretty awesome. You should be able to get it. So I'll probably just go through some of the things that's actually inside the book, and we'll just try to get some discussion going.
Send us a bunch of these books so we can hang it up during the meetups.
You know, it's free, right? So this is the first free one. So yeah. So what I'm going to talk about is nothing really new in terms of what you guys should be knowing. In terms of the specifics, I think a lot of things that Kai has already been covering, except that I think rather than repeating myself, maybe you just do it a little bit of a more interactive round robin, and I'll just go through about what SRE is, Site Reliability Engineering, why some of the topics in the book, and let's try to get some dialogue going to see what everyone feels about certain things. So yeah, there are actually two books. So as you can see from the screen share over here, which is from Google itself. The first book you can see here, you can read online for free. But if you want, and you're more traditional guy, if you prefer a hard copy book, please get it. It's very much worth it, even though I don't remember finishing the book. So yeah, it's a good book. And then there's actually a second book which just came out a couple of months ago, I think. So as you can see from here, you have to buy from Google Books or Amazon to actually get your own copy. In terms of these two books, the first book touches more on the theory of things, on why SRE is good, how Google used to do things, and all those stories. The second book covers a lot more on implementation details, how to be able to implement some of the things that they have been talking about in the first book. So specifically, the second book has a lot more interesting in-depth stories about certain incidents or certain more specific examples of how Google actually does their site reliability, or how things actually set up. So yeah, just out of curiosity, just based on a show of hands, or rather, like, how many of you identify more of a developer person who actually prefers to write more code than managing all the sysadmin stuff? Show of hands. One code person? Only two. Holy crap! The rest of you, sysadmin guys, make files, install from. We are screwed. So anyway, one of the things actually set up in this particular book in terms of the introduction is that it's just like what Kai was showing. The first phase, the traditional sysadmin way of doing things, is very manual. How would you be able to install a program into a server, make sure the server is healthy? Oh, last time everyone is bragging about those particular phase, the server uptime of how many years of not rebooting. Those are, well, used to be
good indicators of how well run your sysadmin stuff is. But some of the tenets and things that we want to be able to go through in SRE is just that as you go along the further phases and stuff, you realize is that the whole point of admining a system is to make sure that stuff still runs, stuff still gets done. That's what I was mentioning. And to be able to do some of those things, certain things that we are used to in doing as a sysadmin, making sure that all the kernels actually patch up and things like that, doesn't really make sense, or it makes better sense if you can just automate some of these things. If you, especially when it comes down to the early DevOps, we'll be pushing for tools such as Ansible, Puppet, Chef, etc. Those were pretty good at the time, I suppose, but it is just basically some tools and products you can use to be able to achieve what you want as a sysadmin or a dev or operator. Is just that make sure that stuff still runs, stuff don't break. But in the end, what I'm trying to get at is there are better ways. Let me go through the introduction again. So sysadmin approach, I'm not going to go through the details, but ultimately so and so, blah 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 blah. The important bit comes down to it, what exactly is site reliability engineering and how it relates to DevOps. I'm going to go back to that one. Is just that when you look into the role of a sysadmin at large, it is to make sure to be able to do these things I just highlighted, is to make sure that the system you're running as a sysadmin, as the system guy, is to make sure that the system is available to the users regardless of, oh, what is your system uptime is. No one cares about the system uptime. The users don't really care about your server uptime. They care whether they can actually still use the server. They care whether the latency of the server is actually still up. It does not matter whether or not your uptime is that high when you still compile your latest stuff just to be able to run on your Gen 2 box or whatever box that you have to compile your stuff on, to make sure that everything is still, to your users, it's still fast in terms of performance. And I suppose we don't really measure this as much from a traditional system. I mean, it's just that to make sure that your stuff runs in an efficient manner, that you are not using 10 times more resources than you actually need to. That's why I suppose is that one of the more attractive options of using serverless is just that you don't really tie in and pay for the resources that you don't really need. You only pay for the things that you actually use. Change management, how fast can you do a rollback? Those are related to all these things. So monitoring, emergency response, capacity planning of the services. So this is basically what SRE is, a rephrasing of what a sysadmin should be doing. And to be able to do these things is much more of a slightly different dang, I casted the wrong screen. Okay.
You've been casting all this time.
Yeah, I cast the wrong screen.
You have been flipping through these slides all
Yes,
this time?
so anyway, I'm just gonna okay.
Can you
So
again?
no. Sysadmin flip through. Okay, read the book free and all stuff. It opened a new tab. I didn't know that. Okay, so yeah, stuff happens. So sometimes it's anyway. If anyone asks, this is SRE. Okay, ability. So any tools, everything you read, anything we actually do, it's all to make sure that these things actually happens. So it's either how we actually do something, okay, but what is the difference between DevOps and SRE? Most of the time, what we should be thinking about DevOps and SRE is, in terms of the relationship, is that it should not matter as much. But if you go down the details of what is the difference between SRE and DevOps, is that DevOps is a method to implement SRE, something that was actually mentioned in the second book. So for the programmers, is that okay? In the book it says class SRE implements DevOps. Was it class DevOps implement SRE? One of them. So it is actually how we manage to be able to achieve all the things set up over here are some of the tools and methods that was developed over time, the different phases of the DevOps movement, using Puppet, Chef, whatever, and so on and so forth, monitoring your systems using Grafana, Prometheus, etc. So yeah, that. But one of the things, if you go through the book, is that you will realize one thing very will stand out is that it talks a lot about the Google products and etc. It's just that they never specifically mentions any specific tools or products they use, because when it comes down to SRE, a lot of times is that in my opinion at least, is that SRE is not so much of a product or this organization or process, but it's a combination of all these things. It is not a product. You don't use XYZ or Kubernetes to be able to handle, to be able to do SRE, or Amazon to be able to do SRE. It's about how you use those products to be able to achieve those things.
So the book doesn't touch any specific tooling?
No, it doesn't specific tooling. At least on the first book. On the second book, it actually mentions some of the toolings they actually use to be able to do those things. But the most important thing is that there's more than one way to do it. Especially for the pro guys, more than one ways to do it. Happy, fun, evil, nasty, complex way to do things. But it really pays to bear in mind that all these things we talked about is to be able to implement all these things. So regardless of your personal preference of one particular tool over another, really doesn't really matter as much as everyone in the team be able to work together. So one of the things that was quite obvious, often shared in the DevOps groups is that to be able to effectively implement DevOps or even SRE, it requires a lot of coordination and communication. One of the key things to make this possible is the buy-in and the communications between the developers and the operators, the DevOps, so that rather than a full stack programmer handling everything, the whole point of the DevOps is that everyone is in the same team to be able to communicate, to be able to do all these things that you want to be able to do. So rather than some dry topics, I just want to touch on one more thing, which is in terms of it talks about customers, so I think I'd rather not say that on stream. Anyway, one of the good things in terms of Kubernetes, don't use Kubernetes by the way, unless you are a glutton for punishment. Seriously, it's just that if you read the second book, you will actually have some very nice use cases. I'm serious about this. That they actually have a lot of weird problems with Google Kubernetes itself, inside Google, where they had to get all the developers of Kubernetes itself on board to be able to fix one issue in several hours. So when things get complicated sometimes in Kubernetes, you really do not know how to track down certain things unless you pull a lot of people actually involved. So there's a lot of black box and magic that is actually in Kubernetes. So even though for someone who used to deal with some Linux stuff and some fancy networking stuff, to get Kubernetes to behave sometimes is very black magic. When it works, it's nice. When it doesn't...
I was going to say, we touched on this earlier, but anyone who's done a production workload with Docker will have noticed some things, right? And then when you move up the abstraction layer to Kubernetes, you'll just get an order of magnitude of issues again.
A heck lot of order of magnitude of issues. So even so, so much so that if you are used to run Kubernetes or Docker, sometimes if you just want something that is a little bit more manageable, you just use Docker Compose. It mostly just easier to debug than full-on Kubernetes solution.
You use it for Compose
single instance? Single instance. How many times you have to debug networking issues between two different hosts? That is the core of a lot of the Kubernetes issues, when the hosts are not communicating each other and etc. So yeah. Speaking of etc, it is etcd is also another fun component. When it works, it's magical. When it doesn't,
fun.
Even Docker Compose is a pain. I mean, they changed the networking about 3 times.
Yeah.
As a question.
So you're having this problem on your own, you host your own Kubernetes cluster, or you
Yes.
from GKE?
Okay, first thing first, we run our own Kubernetes cluster.
How did you manage it? How did you do that instance? How did you create
Cube admin,
Sorry.
Cube ADM. Cube ADM. Okay, got it? Okay. So it's basically just install on a plain old, a lot of things that at least that the things that you're actually used to, some of the stable stuff. And more specifically, the GKE issue I mentioned is actually in the second book, the site reliability workbook. There is a lot of case studies. One of the case studies was how they handled some of the more nasty issues in the Google scale type issues, and one of the Google scale issues was debugging some nasty issue in Kubernetes, GKE itself. So
So you will only face issues when your scale is like Google, or what if you're like a small.
you must really know what you are buying into when you just jump
Will
upon.
you have this kind of issues?
We actually exactly have the same type of issue system. So it's the cert cannot the what was it? The certificate cannot be renewed or some other issues. Yes.
Usually with these complex Docker orchestrations, the initial setup is the difficult part, and then scaling from a working setup is great. But yeah, the initial thing can be so hard.
Yeah.
And also upgrade.
It was fun.
Does anyone use a Core OS here?
Is it the same as Kubernetes these days? Core OS was supporting
Core OS
Kubernetes.
solves a small problem in the sense that the host operating system is up to date when you run Docker containers.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It's actually not that great a solution because it can reboot and you don't expect it to.
The biggest issue to us is related to networking. A lot of networking hiccups. Networking hiccups cause some
Core OS
nasty
is
issues.
a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah. Anyway, unless you are very familiar with Linux and networking and stuff, let's just say that Kubernetes and some nasty issues goes much deeper than that. I do not recommend this unless you are very familiar with a lot of those sysadmin stuff. It solves a lot of issues that you probably don't have, but introduce a lot more complicated issues. It's very good for a lot of things. Like for instance, for us is that when we were running our cluster, someone rebooted or someone actually killed some of our nodes. Everything just filled over nicely. So nice. We didn't know it was down until the alert system actually alerted us. So yeah, there is. Except that when why we use Kubernetes is actually very simple. Sometimes we need those cloud fancy features in environments that's actually not cloud. In other words, on-premise. So you need on-premise monitoring. Yeah, sometimes it works, except that when the enterprise networks don't allow you to send emails out, for instance, or their email system is actually down. So you actually got to figure out in a way that to be able to mitigate around or work around the limitations of your particular setup. So a lot of the things that we would love to be able to use, sometimes it's not available because, like for instance, this is just an anecdote and it's not the same for a lot of things. Again, what I say here is anecdote. Things have changed. This is actually based on so many times ago. Things can be like the DNS can be unstable, so that if you rely on the DNS, too bad. The NTP server, sometimes they actually block the NTP server, or the NTP server is just not around, so that if you have more than one host, sometimes you get clock drifts, and because the NTP server is not usable, okay, things aren't working because the two different servers cannot get consensus with each other because the time drift is too great, and you have a host of a lot of these other issues. Yeah. Yeah. Is it worth it? Is the question. Is it worth it? So a lot of times is that you are actually doing the one of the things about SRE. I'm trying to get back on topic. Is that you must at all times remember why you are doing certain things that you set up to be able to do. So if, like, for instance, using all the time and
time to be able to do Kubernetes or whatever the newfangled one is that you must remember what sort of things that you want to solve, availability or the scale of problems that you want to solve, whether there's actually a simpler way to solve it at your scale. So like for instance, if email always works and is stable for your environment, please use email or something really simple as that. So yeah, you may have to introduce additional complexity, but I suppose it comes with experience to actually correctly gauge what sort of trade-offs that introducing a newfangled something or other can actually solve your problems or introduce more problems. And a lot of times, sometimes is that even though that we go full on, we know that it's going to cause a lot more problems, we still do it anyway. And in the end, it's like everyone's blaming, oh yeah, we full on knew that there's going to be problems, but we still use it anyway. And yeah, oops, we told you so. But yeah, at least we know.
It gives you the return that you need in the area that you need. That's still valid.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If it allows you to do something you couldn't do with
exactly.
and then okay, comes with a whole set of problems, but that's the price I pay.
Exactly. So one of the things that actually made that possible is that if any part of these things that actually involves all these high ranging whatever tubes, all these things you use, is that hopefully whoever is actually in charge of deciding, that's why being the CTO is nice, hopefully, is that you full on know exactly why you choose one thing over another and be prepared to pay for the consequences of choosing that. If end up like you are in a team that somehow is get a lot of hard to actually get some consensus actually going, is just that it does not matter what tool or whatever you choose. Sometimes having that particular conflict in terms of I like this one over another, if you cannot get over that particular conflict, it doesn't work, because one of the things that makes SRE or even DevOps possible is just that the ops and the dev people somehow can work together. So rather than I mean, if you dig down deeper down the book, the SRE, is that all the things like blameless, post-mortem, everything, all these things about is about communication. All these things about to be able to make all these things work regardless of this one, and to be able to, for whatever this one is like, not just to be able to roll back your Docker images or software. Sometimes you may have to roll back your infrastructure if it doesn't really make sense, or whatever infrastructure you actually be able to choose. And to be able to do that, sometimes is that you really need the buy-in from the people paying your the paycheck and all the stuff, or the customers, to be able to make that particular thing as soon as possible. So unfortunately, some of these things comes with experience.
I wanted to quickly bitch about Docker again.
Go ahead.
My
Intermission.
Here's a bitch about Docker. So the Docker file is an amazing way of describing a complex system, right? You can, you're from Ubuntu version 14 or something, and then you can describe all the dependencies, and then you can do quite complex things to sort of build your image and have your 1 gigabyte image. Now, in my opinion, having a 1 gigabyte application to do something like a little web application is just fucking crazy.
It is. We
should be making binaries that are like 1 megabyte big to handle.
That's why you shouldn't be using Perl. Like you should use Go.
So my complaint with the Docker file is that it's an awesome way of describing a complex system, but then that opens up the Pandora's box for developers to add more dependencies. Now we can, since we have a mechanism to handle the complexity, now we can introduce complexity. And now you've got two problems.
So usually people on Docker file, most of you don't really Ubuntu. So basically we might use a
well, obviously there's tricks to.
Just run the application, that's all. And then you combine together with multiple.
But still, like I'm a bit old school. So my chosen way of distributing an application is the static binary. Of course, you can make a Docker file or a Docker image, or whatever, ship and run a static binary, which is getting close to what I would advise you to do. But why even do it all like this? Just get back to basics, dude. Just run a binary. I mean, what I'm trying to say is you can do the right thing with Docker. but the door is open to do the wrong thing. And unfortunately, that door was very inviting to people.
That really depends on your technology stack. Although the things that you described would be very nice if everyone has some form of archival tool, like the Java jars, where you can just package everything you need in a single place. Or, well, Go, of course, you can just static binary. Yay, everyone wins. Who cares what OS you're running on? But for a lot of scripting languages, I'm not sure what is the favorite poster child of scripting languages that can go wrong. JavaScript. Yeah.
Node.js.
Yeah. So how would you be able to package that in a single binary is always a tricky part. So in the end, Docker is just that it's basically a chainsaw to be able to solve all those type of issues. You're using Perl. Docker works with that.
Colorful. There is a whole set of different environments and systems. It's a trade-off. It might not fit your particular case, but it doesn't mean that that's the situation for everybody.
Yeah.
If you're running a website on static language, is a good one. It's full of dependencies that is outside of your control. You cannot decide that you are going to package all of that in a single binary.
We're talking about Node.js or
any of them.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna go out on a limb here, and one of my favorite ways to actually achieve stability here is that in the end, I think some guys may still disagree with me and all stuff. Is that to make sure that you can actually do repeatable builds and stuff like that. Screw it. You should be running your own copy of everything. You should vendor everything. Any dependencies that you use, you should be able to import that as one single log file or one single point of time, so that even if you deploy it in the wild, if you depend on some really weird obscure SSL libraries or whatnot, you should be able to pinpoint one version that is problematic. Because sometimes based on weird experiences is that if you slightly different configuration or even slightly different libraries that you link to, you get some really nasty different weird issues. For better or for worse, if you are using Docker, magically you will be locked, hopefully, if you do it right. If you don't, then it's a different story. That particular version is locked in time, and you can actually figure out what exactly is the one that's causing the issue.
Well,
hopefully.
My experience with Docker is that I've used Docker images, and then the underlying image changed the path of a configuration file or something.
Maybe you're using latest, I guess.
Yeah, and you can call me an idiot for using latest, but the amount of Docker files I've used that also use latest would indicate to me everyone uses latest.
Correct.
No, you should
It's doing it wrong.
Yeah, you should. I know that this gentleman was saying the same thing. But sometimes I use an image which I might, what do you call it, tag, but the underlying image is using latest.
That's why you should vendor the Docker image in your own registry, so you know exactly what version you use. Yes. So it's actually a trade-off, but in the end, for us is that to avoid some of these nasty issues is that we have in this case Jenkins, but the two doesn't matter. It's just that you have a copy of every single dependencies you actually use, so that there's a lot of engineering effort required if you want to keep track of the latest bugs to actually try it.
If you take that approach of not using latest, then you're going to probably have a security bug pretty quickly, aren't you?
Yeah, that's why you have other things on top of it to, that's why you slap something on top of it. Yay, more layers!
The way that I run Docker images is probably not the right way, but most people do it, is like I have a service file that, RN's the name of the run thing, and then it does a Docker pull, and then it runs the image on restart.
Do you use do you run your production Docker stuff using docker.com, hub docker.com, or your own registry?
Hub docker.com, like most people.
Okay. In my opinion, I'm going to be upfront. In my opinion,
yeah,
that's doing it wrong.
Exactly. You heard my point. Doing it the way that most people do it, i.e. the obvious way or whatever, is the wrong way. And that just makes me think to myself, holy shit, this is totally fucked. It's a burning train wreck of a platform. walk away, guys.
It's
because
no,
the
it's a
more
tool.
they're
It's a
using
tool.
it-
If you use the tool wrong, or you use the tool
on,
the easy way, it's just like, oh, I'll use PHP for my website. Sometimes it's probably the good idea, except that a lot of people use PHP wrong.
No, it's a tool should be designed to be used correctly from the outset. And if people use it wrong, there's something wrong with the tool.
Yeah, can I make gun analogy and guns don't kill people. People kill people.
That's the wrong argument. So the web is wrong. The web is a terrible platform for deploying applications. But you can't do anything. That's what people use. So I can complain my whole life that the web is terrible, but it doesn't help the fact that the whole world
The
runs on
normal
the
way
web.
of doing web development is right. You're not going to shoot yourself in the foot by writing some bad HTML and uploading it, for Christ's sake. It's going to work. That's the beautiful thing about it.
But that's not what people do.
I think the other thing that Docker may solve is just that if you deploy some of the stuff directly, just to that means that the developers themselves are pushing directly to Lambda. Is that correct?
Yes. Through
So
CI.
there's both the upside and downside. Is that you trust your developers. So
It's not such a big deal. I mean, you've got to trust somebody in.
oh yes, true.
And,
It's a bit popular, Jeffrey.
And
and you can mandate in your CI that a certain amount of coverage should exist.
Yeah.
And you can also have in your DevOps whatever thing that you deploy to a dev environment first, and if everyone is happy, then it gets tagged for production.
The bringing back a little bit back to topic is just that which I think is really highly dependent on the team of people you actually get to work with. So I also want to be honest here. Is just that if I go through the book, the obvious thought that I have going through the books is that holy shit, I'm doing it wrong. We are doing it wrong. So it's like yeah, this is the best practice. Yes, and we put it aside. So we all know what's the correct thing to do, except that sometimes we can't be asked to actually do it. So that's one of the
So to chime in with my experience at work quite recently, we do tag our Docker images and even pin down the versions that we use. But still things go wrong. The packages in the Alpine repository went missing for some reason. That's out of our control.
vendor everything. You should vendor it.
So that caused our production.
Yeah, man.
That caused our production image to fail, CI failing, and then we troubleshoot. Turns out our PHP application was set faulting because of libSSL wrong version. And then we pinned down, but then eventually the version that we pinned down to went missing from the repository. So that would have been solved if we vendor everything like Wantan said.
One question: if let's just say that your libcode is actually segporting, if you're in a Lambda environment, what libcode will you be using? And if your Lambda environment libcode is segporting, how would you know?
You have no freedom in PAS, which Lambda is.
The beautiful thing about static binaries is that the object code is inside the static binary, right?
Oh yeah.
You're not depending on any dependency in the
Yeah, it
system.
just so happens that our static binary is called a bloody big Docker image.
Well, there's a big difference between a 1 gigabyte image and a static binary.
Yeah.
There's so many advantages to using static binary. Like
Yeah.
the runtime speed is so much faster. For a start, it's so much smaller.
Except if you're using Java.
It's easier to I don't know. It's easier to do everything with it.
Yeah, but your startup time for your PostScript is not very fast. You should just migrate to Go. Go is faster.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I'm
Why
sure-
not Rust instead? Rust is faster than Go. Sorry.
While we're on topic of Alpine, quick base
Back on topic.
if you read the recent news about the RCE on Alpine, you need to rebuild your image, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. I mean, I just find it difficult to understand that. Okay, you're vendoring and you're tagging, but then you probably do you have a procedure to actually update the
Well,
tags?
the good thing about Perl is just that no one has updated Perl for a long time.
Well, Perl aside, I mean, you got there's probably a libSSL bug or something every month, you got to be updating your tags every month.
How
right?
would anyone solve PHP's problem of, in this case, let me, outside of Docker, or be able to make sure that, I'm trying to think in terms of all the SRE terms here, is that in terms of change management, monitoring, not sure, how to make sure that your PHP application is repeatable, especially if all the PHP keeps, I don't know, new libcurl, hey, everything breaks, great.
And another thing to say about static binaries, if it's done right, is that if you have a 1 GB image, your what do you call it? Your security surface area is gigantic, right? Someone can exploit some function in there, even if it's not exposed.
I'm gonna go jump straight to the point. If you have a 1 GB Docker image, you're doing it wrong. Okay, but you should use multi-stage builds.
Okay, listen. If you have libsl or libcurl in your system, there's probably these functions that are not even used. Some esoteric way of communicating or something. You know, some security bugs can exploit those functions.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about a static build is, if it's done correctly, sometimes it's not done correctly. When you do a static build, when the object is what do you call it, linked, the objects, i.e. the functions that are actually used, are brought in. The functions that are not used are not made object files and not brought into your application. Hence,
how fast can you compile a static binary build with an updated version of libcurl to solve some SSL nasty issues?
How much is it? It takes
how fast can you deploy?
I can deploy
2 seconds.
I can deploy in 2 seconds. Yeah, rolling out a new libcurl and testing it and all the rest of it takes far longer, man. Jeez.
Yeah, but what the libcurl just had a security, whatever, I don't know, CVE. Nah, anyway, those are hypothetical situations, and I'm just gonna, otherwise we're not gonna go anywhere. So I'll just go to the point that there sometimes actually believe in terms of what both of you are trying to do and what you want to use, both complain about Docker and not Docker and all the stuff is that, I don't think there's a silver bullet. It's about trade-offs. So definitely is the 1 GB of Docker image is, I will hit that as well. So that's actually something that's actually really wrong here. But in terms of the biggest problem with a 1 GB Docker image is the amount of time you have to wait to upload that image. Especially you have a 2 meg line upstream. Seriously.
Your name again? Sorry, is Han. So you were saying that DevOps is a communication. You have to work with your team members. But what happens if you're an asshole like me, who is quite well versed at doing it the right way? But the trouble is, let's be honest, that if you're working on a web application project, you're probably going to be working with a front-end team who only know how to do it in a certain way. And that way is to use a shit ton of node dependencies. Yeah, I mean, you're basically stuck, aren't you, unless you're the boss of the company, right? You're basically stuck with like a huge complexity bomb.
So anyway, I'm just gonna the diplomatic way of solving these things in the end might be exactly same of a lot of things in SRE. If you notice, is that one of the things I didn't actually mention, that a lot of things that we do as sysadmin is just all this coding stuff and compiling stuff, making all Docker images together. Is that if you go down the high level of what this SRE book is actually describing, is that they're actually measuring a lot of these things in terms of pure numbers. So a lot of things, like for instance, what Kai was mentioning, his canary releases or canary checks, or even
canary metrics.
Canary metrics is that can be combined on a more, at least the terms that actually used in the SRE book, is that SLO, which is service level objective, of you will be defining what you want as a high level goal. For instance, the latency uptime of so and so, or even if the speed of deployment is an issue, that your speed of pushing through a change may be within 10 seconds, 1 minute or something like that. To be able to define those high level objectives these high-level objectives, service level objectives, or even your own internal service level, I'm not sure how you actually do it. As long as you define these in terms of numbers that make sense for you as an organization, the whole that everyone can actually agree on, then it's a matter of figuring out what sort of tool and things which makes that possible. If a lot of front-end developers want to be able to develop some really huge dependencies, in the end, like, can you meet this particular performance or size requirement or build requirement? If no, that means is that they got to figure out how they should be able to do that. So to be able to work with them, that okay, can you not do so many dependencies and whatnot? So in the end, it's just like hammering down that everyone should be able to meet the high-level objectives of that particular.
But the reality is, they're going to say, do your job. And
You guys suck! You guys are fired!
Host this Node.js application from hell.
Fired. Is it Donald Trump? I can't do that. I can't do the American accent.
Wrap up.
Oh yeah. Oh, wrapping up. That was fast. This is the first paragraph. Come on. So anyway, if you go through the book, there's a lot of these things which is very abstract, and it's a good book. Read it, even though I didn't finish it. So I'm a very bloody hypocrite. What we want in terms of all these, even the SIE practices and stuff, is that as much as possible, it's actually very good for everyone to be able to get together when? Oh, it's up to you. I don't know. Just one reason, so that hopefully someone actually gets something out of it, or among all these things. So hopefully we can have some feedback in terms of what we did right and what we did wrong. Some post-mortem of this meetup as a matter. But monthly, we want to target about a monthly meetup like this target, and let's try to be able to meet our objective target of one meetups. But hopefully someone can be able to continue this, and if anyone, can you speak about Docker and whatnot, or anyone can volunteer to speak for the next meetup? Food will be provided. So.
Yeah, we already have two volunteers.
Hey!
Third, including Fadli. So.
What do you guys want to hear? When you actually, what was your expectations when you come to DevOps meetup? Debates about Docker and Kubernetes. That was fun.
I just want to cry.
Oh.
Is anybody interested in API gateways?
Sure.
Like payment? Payment gateways? No, API.
Like
why not?
service mesh? Like service mesh or you guys from Katsana, so you guys are scaling, having scaling problems now? No,
They
running
move to
Docker?
Go, so they don't need additional servers. Right, go faster, go rocks.
No, we run on PHP.
Why do you migrate to Go?
Bare server or Docker or?
Sorry,
No,
because I know. Okay, cost Laravel.
My mantra is if it works, don't touch it.
Oh, hold that thought. I'm gonna put another thing about SRE. Okay.
Sorry, so what we basically run a traditional lens type, not lens type, yeah. So some part of it we run on AWS. We make use a lot of spot distance because we are poor, and it cuts a lot of. So we are looking into converting to Kubernetes.
Good luck with that.
But for now, we doesn't.
Be prepared to lose sleep.
I feel we doesn't really need it now because, like I say, if it works, don't touch it.
You're using AMIs and auto-scaling launch.
Yeah, it works.
To be honest, stick with it.
Yeah.
That's what Amazon is famous
So
for.
that's why we are using Jenkins for our CI/CD. I basically doesn't do much nowadays. So because I just give the access to my developers and just push deploy, because we doesn't implement the auto deploy thingy, because we still need some controls but it can be done. We just like to click things. That's all. When we put
There's a lot of things to click Kubernetes.
yeah,
More things to click Kubernetes.
we try on our development. We already use Docker Compose, and we doesn't use Alpine, but instead we are using Debian Slim. It's small image, 22 megabytes. You should guys try it, and maybe it will fix your dependency thingy. Because we try Alpine, it breaks a lot, and so that's why we just move. At first we use Minideb from Bitnami, then we move to official Debian. Debian Slim.
Question: how do you manage your cluster? Do you have cluster?
We don't use cluster.
So you use Docker to create the AMI, or what do you mean?
No, the Docker is for our development.
Oh.
So all the dev use Docker, but we use the traditional auto scaling AMI auto scaling. Yeah.
That's the right way.
Yeah,
I second that.
I think so too.
I +5 that.
Yeah. And we do have all this Lambda function to keep track of our AMI, where after the AMI is 30 days old and it's not being used, when we delete it. That's how we keep control of our costs, because AMI will actually eat a lot of your bills. So some people say that, oh, if you do auto scaling, you will lost track of your AMI, which is the latest. So what we do is we tag the AMI with our latest commit, the commit hash. So when we deploy, we just pull the commit. So whenever anything goes wrong, we can check the GitHub and we can say, so it's tally together.
What do you use to manage all your process? Because I use CloudFormation, but you use it.
No, we use Ansible. Yeah.
Ansible. But why do you use Ansible? Sorry.
No. We have
to control your AMIs and stuff.
Jenkins, we want to build everything AMI. We use AMI. We use Jenkins to call a script a packer to build all this AMI. Then we push it AWS. Then when it's a long story.
That's the next time. That's volunteer for a talk. Next time.
It works. It's kind of an old school way.
So do you create your AMI from scratch, or do you use your existing AMIs?
AMI from scratch is kind of long time to take. I have a pre-configured one. So base, we call it base. So we use that as base. Then we pull all the latest code, pull all the latest dependencies that we need. Then we build it, and it takes, I don't know, it doesn't take that long, but it's acceptable for now.
So how do you manage your Ansible? Basically, you run it from your local machines, or you run it from
No, we have Jenkins for that. Yeah, Jenkins will call all the Ansible. We install everything on GitHub, and we pull everything the latest one.
So basically, anything running parallelly, or do you run on one instance of Ansible to provision?
Depends. We run parallel.
How do you run parallel?
No, you can in Jenkins you can actually spawn a new instance to help you run build things. So what we do, and we're not a big shop, so we doesn't have scale issues, but we do transact a lot of. We use Go for our logger. Basically, we are a GPS company. We are logistic tracking, so we use Go and it works fine.
One question: how do you manage your configurations?
We use Ansible Vault. As in all the variables in Ansible Vault, and we store the credentials in Jenkins, the encrypted in Jenkins, and we all the script, our script will call and decrypt it. And we also store in this tool called Crate Stash. It's actually equivalent in AWS have their own. You can actually, if you use AWS has this KMS. So that's a very good tool if you want to store all your credentials. So basically, if your alternative of that is the vault, HashiCorp vault. Yeah. It's an equivalent of HashiCorp. It's a very good tool to use if you have a lot of credentials that you don't want to store anywhere else.
Backup proof. Backup proof.
This is my mentor, and
I said it before, but I said it again. One reason I like AMIs is that it's a block level image. So when you map it to the EC2, it's fast. It's really fast. Yeah. Unlike a Docker image.
yeah, as long as you manage the capacity is good, I think you.
Before I look at a quick question, guys, does this time of meetup work for you guys? Or is it too late? Or no, you should get the current format.
I think the other more important is that in terms of what are the topics and what are the sort of things that you guys want to discuss. To me personally, it's just that having a more interactive session is a heck of more interesting than a speaker just talking and talking. Because it's just boring.
You know about how you guys run your CI/CD.
Jenkins.
The way, like for example, in because when I'm trying to plan to experiment with Kubernetes, so I don't get the idea how to transition all this from code push and everything to CI/CD. So if you guys have this production, maybe you can share.
I don't think it's actually a lot of silver bullets. We can share a lot of things, but in the end, I can share a lot more problems than solutions.
You can come and talk to the sales team for consultations.
It seems like you guys are very locked in Amazon, right? You use all AWS.
Not really, but we already logged in RDS, unfortunately.
Wait, by the way, I have a question. Who's using Kubernetes? So basically, if you have to access
Yeah.
inside.
Can I just teach a job ad? Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I work for Boost, the largest wallet corporation. So we are heavy Kubernetes users. I'm actually the accidental DevOps guy. I'm a developer, but everybody else on the team doesn't want to touch Linux. So I'm the guy who the responsibility fell to. But now, after accumulating a lot of technical debt in the Kubernetes area and our CI/CD and everything, we are hiring aggressively for a DevOps team. Okay, so we're already it's going to be our DevOps team, maybe 3 or 4. So we're going to probably double that. So we run Kubernetes using AWS, but without, of course, without VKS. So we're interested in getting your guys dirty for Kubernetes and having all the fun like chit chat and say.
Yeah,
Please check your resume. So your resume, you can just send it to Firdaus@mypost.com. So we're very happy.
You can share the
Yeah,
information on the meetup group.
Sure, yeah, post it there. Sure.
Which is another thing is that what is the official meetup group? You guys want to stick with Facebook or using the meetup just use as a command? Meetup.com? Meetup.com? Yeah. So I think meetup.com will be the more primary than any other groups.
YouTube is nice. You get the calendar invitation and everything. You change, you broadcast to everyone.
Yeah.
Most importantly, meetup is not Facebook.
Oh yeah.
It's not on Facebook.
See, some people have problems with Docker, I have problems with Facebook.
It's fine. I'll still contribute to your lectures to Facebook.
Back in.
Docker is a Facebook database.
I somehow managed to commutation and load the chair.
Right side. No, right side.
There's a actual lock. Yeah. You should. Is there any leftovers?
No, not that you want.
Alright guys, thank you.
Thank you.